inform.
Religious freedom is about people of faith being able to live out their faith, live out their convictions, no matter where they are.
We equip.
Sacred honor is the courage to speak truth, to live out your free speech.
We also rejoice in our sufferings because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope.
This is At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome to At the Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution Coach. Appreciate you joining us today. And yes, we are going to continue our trek down the path of biblical citizenship in modern America. I was getting a little nervous about just having too much of that and maybe overwhelming you with some of the more in-depth training and some of these videos that have, frankly been incredibly popular across the country and equipped a ton of actual biblical citizens. I think they're good, but, then again, I'm in them and I help to organize it. But as I said on the first time we shared one of these a few weeks back, this was a miraculous thing. I could never have planned for what became biblical citizenship in modern America. It was absolutely miracle after miracle and just a God thing throughout the whole thing. And so even today, it's still being used. And so I'm so thankful that Charlie Kirk's in there and Jack Hibbs and Rob McCoy and David Barton and Tim Barton and Rabbi Daniel Lappin and Jeremy Boring and the list just goes on and on and on. I'm so thankful for all of them giving of their time and contributing to the commentary within what has become more than 1 million people going through it, what has become one of the most important tools for churches to use to educate their flock on what the Bible says about how to treat your neighbors, how to deal with politics and government from a biblical perspective, because it's part of life, and the Bible applies to everything in life. And so this course helps people get their head around that, because they've been lied to for so long about the proper role of the church. So I'm very, very thankful to be a part of it. But I've aired now the first 3 episodes. There are 8 episodes in biblical citizenship. It's a 8-week course, and each video is around an hour and 20 minutes. I think there's one that's about an hour and a half. But anyway, around that time. And what we recommend that everybody do is get in their living room, invite some friends over, gather at the church, wherever you want to do this. We've had it in every place you can imagine: bait and tackle shops, Harley Davidson dealerships, funeral parlors. It's everywhere, and that's good. But what we really recommend is you get together with people, watch the video, and then the conversation after the video is what's so incredibly powerful. That's when you start applying what you learned in the video and sharpening each other's countenance on how to do that. So that's how I really recommend you do it. And that's one reason I'm hesitant to share as much of it here on the radio program as I have, because I don't want you to feel like because you listen to At the Core on a regular basis and you've heard the first 3 weeks of biblical citizenship, and now I'm about to share a little bit more with you. I don't want you to feel like, okay, now I've been through the course. No, the best way to do the course is with your friends and family. Go through the whole thing together, because then you will find good action items to do after it's all said and done. But for now, I'm going to share another one of those weeks, and it'll take all of today's program and part of our program next Tuesday as well. And I might even go one more. So remember, there's 8 weeks. I might even share a total of 4 of those weeks with you here on the radio, just so that you get a good dose of this stuff. I mean, it really is, without question, it's essentially, I hate using the word re-education. It's essentially bringing back civics and educating the American people in the way that the schools absolutely failed to do. They dropped the ball. They did not do their job. And as a result, we have an ignorant population. And so it's vitally important for us to do our part in studying these things, putting in the effort to learn these things, so that we can be good citizens and hold our government accountable and get back to having a government that actually governs the way that our Constitution intended for it to do, the way that the Founding Fathers intended for it to do. So anyway, we're going to jump in. And actually, I said I had done 3. I've only done 2 weeks so far. The first week was called The Foundation. The second week was called Tending the Garden. And this one is called Understanding the Times. Let's jump in to biblical citizenship in modern America.
I think biblical citizenship as a Christian would be stewardship. That God has given us this republic to be stewards over.
And you begin to love what God loves and hate what he hates in the scriptures because your heart is lining up with the heart of God because of the gospel.
Well, and so many Christians are confused because they're being told things from different people, such as, oh, Christians shouldn't do anything in government, stay out of that. It's not what the Bible says. In fact, we're called to be biblical citizens.
If you're a Christian, a person of faith, you must care about what's happening in our culture. You must get involved in voting.
Biblical principles are what produce freedom in society, but you won't have biblical principles in society in which you don't have citizens with a biblical worldview.
The further we move away from biblical principles, the further we move away from liberty and freedom.
As people are experiencing tyranny, they're asking why, what has happened, and there's just this feeling of being lost right now and not knowing where to turn. And you just gave us the foundation. This is truth. Welcome to week 3 of Biblical Citizenship. We are having a great time learning the truth of what the Bible says about how we should act as citizens. And last week, wow, we went into that amazing Wall Builders Museum and Library, and David took us through the biblical view of the different spheres of government and then taught us how to tend the garden. So important. And then Tim Barton gave us that response to the 1619 Project, and he gave us the truth about American history. He answered that question, is America worth saving? And I don't know about you guys, but I was blown away by the human interest stories, the facts, the data, all the things I didn't even know about America ending slavery. How many of us knew that we were the first ones to end the slave trade, that we were fourth in the world to end slavery completely? You know, we've been taught for so long that we had to be dragged kicking and screaming as the last ones to end it. So all of those truth bombs from last week in the library were just amazing. And we're going to try to top it this week. We're going to try to do even more. We're going to take it to a whole nother level. We're actually going to go to the room, Independence Hall, where the Constitution and the Declaration were both created. That very room where the Founding Fathers hammered out the philosophy of America in the Declaration of Independence, and then they hammered out that rule book 11 years later, our Constitution. So we're going to actually get to go into that room and begin to study those things. And I really wanted to take y'all to the library in Aledo, Texas. I mean, we're going to have David again talking this week about truth and courage. And I wanted y'all to be able to see him in person. So I had a jumbo jet lined up. I was going to take all of us. We were going to get on that jumbo jet. We were going to fly to Texas. We were going to cram into the Wall Builders Museum and Library so that you could see David live. But there is no way I can afford a jumbo jet. So it didn't happen. I didn't really get one, but I did even better. We decided to bring the man himself all the way to California, America's premier historian, teaching tonight right here in our biblical citizenship class on the subject of truth and courage. Would you please welcome America's premier historian, David Barton.
Thanks, bro. Thanks, guys. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Let me take you into what we want to cover tonight. And you can tell from the title of the course, it is biblical citizenship. So we try to cover things from a biblical perspective. I'm a Christian, professing Christian, and I hope we can take those Christian principles, apply them with biblical principles, and come up with good solutions. Now, knowing where the country is today, and one of the things we do a lot of work in is polling. We do a lot of national polling, and polling is a good way to kind of have snapshots of where the nation is. And because we've been doing polling in America for nearly 100 years, we can kind of look back and say, hey, here's what we looked like when we were a lot younger, and here's when we were a little older. And so we can make comparisons. Doing that, I would say that one of the biggest issues facing America today is the issue of truth. Quite frankly, truth is under fire in a way that we have never seen it in American history. When you look at what we have going with truth, I would say, without using any kind of melodramatic hyperbole, because I'm not given to that, truth is on life support. And again, that is because of statistical information. Let me show you some of the polling that's out there. Right now, we know that in America, 3 out of 5 Americans believe that there is no absolute moral truth. Now, here's a problem. No nation has ever survived if it can't get at least half of the nation to agree that certain things are right and wrong. If you have more than half the nation that says, no, there's no right or wrong, then no law means anything. There's not a reason to enforce any law because more than half the people are opposed to it. You have to have a moral basis for what's right and wrong. So here we are with 3 out of 5 Americans thinking that they can make up their own moral truth. They can decide what's right and wrong for them. May not be right and wrong for anybody else, but it's okay for me. You cannot govern a nation that way. It gets even worse when you look at the rising generation. Among millennials, it is 4 and 5 millennials believe there's no absolute moral truth. Now, this is the next generation of everything. This is the next generation of theologians, next generation of pastors, next generation of media, next generation of political guys, next generation of scientists and teachers, you name it. And 4 out of 5 think that there's no absolute moral truth. That, again, that is individually self-determined. And even among Christians, it's shocking to see that it's 1 out of 2 Christians who believe there's no absolute moral truth. Now, for me, I think, wait a minute. Surely you've heard of the 10 Commandments. And apparently, for half Christians, they think the 10 Commandments are the 10 suggestions because there's no absolute moral truth. So we are at a point in time where that objective truth really doesn't matter much anymore. It doesn't matter much with what we see in media, what we see in universities, academia. It doesn't matter much in politics. It should, but it doesn't. And so when you look at where we are with really the lack of objective truth, there's so many examples you can turn to. For example, a decade ago, everybody in America knew that there were 2 genders. Well, just a matter of a few years ago, we stopped counting how many genders there were because there were over 90 different self-identified genders at that point in time being legally recognized. I think even on Facebook, they had 74 different genders you could choose from in your individual profile. So we don't know how many there are today. It's hundreds. It's whatever you determine. So the new really acronym for the movement is not LGBTQ. It's LGBTQIA+. And the IA+ adds the other hundreds of genders that are out there. So we don't even know how many genders there are anymore. And in the same way, when we look at things like religion, so many people in America believe no religion's any better than the rest. They're all the same. They're all religions. They're all good. They're all bad, whatever. But there's no distinction among them. And as Christians, we should know better than that. But even with Christians, we find that that's not the case. 80% of Christians say that they believe that religions other than Christianity will get you to heaven. Now, the reason Christianity is unique is because Christianity believes that is the way you're able to go to heaven. But we're saying, no, we don't believe that anymore. It's what we believe for 2,000 years. That's what Jesus taught. That's what the apostles taught. That's what the church taught. But we don't believe that anymore. And so what we see is even 42% of Christians believe that atheists will get into heaven. Now, this is an oxymoronic kind of thing because atheists don't believe in God, and yet somehow they're going to spend eternity with God. You know, how does that work out? And the 56% of Christians believe that a belief in no religion at all is going to get you to heaven. So it doesn't really matter what you believe. We're apparently all going to heaven. And this is why you see in America there's been such a decline and drop in Christian profession. 20 years ago, 85% of all Americans professed Christianity. Today it's down to 65%. And why would it not keep going down? Because if anything you believe is going to get you to heaven, I don't need to be a Christian to get there. I can just believe what I want to believe. I can make up my own truth. And so what we're seeing is this decline of religion in America because it no longer means anything for many people because, again, they self-define. When you look past religion and go into something like even forms of government, it is amazing to me how many people today are having tattoos put on them of the hammer and sickle, communist tattoos. Do we have no knowledge at all of what communism is, or that in the last century and a half it has killed hundreds of millions of people across the world, and we think that's going to be a good form of government for America? Look at the protests and look what's going on statues. Look what's painted on so many of the statues have been taken down. Communist symbols. And we say, oh, it's just protesters. No, that's a philosophy that they apparently don't understand, because if they think that's a good replacement for what America's been, man, they have no clue of what's going on. But apparently all forms of government are the same. The same when you get to education. We used to have 6 standardized tests in America: the California test, the Iowa test of basic achievement, the California achievement test, Stanford achievement test, etc. And therefore we could compare state to state because we all use the same ruler, the same measurement. We could say, oh, Texas is 23rd in whatever, and California is 47th or 18th. Or not anymore. Every state has gone to their own individual state measurement for academics. We can't compare states to states anymore. So we all want to feel good about what we have in school, so we're not looking and saying, well, we're not as good as Alabama or we're better than Oklahoma. All that's gone. We don't have the comparison by which to use, because in education we've changed all the standards, all the tests, completely different way of looking at things. We don't use truth as the base anymore. In the same way, when you look at morality, I already mentioned that most people don't think there are moral rights and wrongs. When you go to history, we simply cancel what we disagree with. So many of the statues that were torn down apparently were racist, and you ask the people who tore them down, who's that guy and what to do? So many civil rights statues were torn down, but they just made the assumption if it's a statue, it's a racist, so we're canceling stuff we don't even know know what we're canceling. I mean, they tore down the statue of David Farragut in Washington, D.C. because he was a racist. No. He was not part of the Confederacy. He was actually the Union naval commander that led the entire Union forces in defeating the Confederacy. You say you want Confederate statues down, you just tore down the statue of the leading naval guy in the Union, and you tore down the statue of Ulysses S. Grant. I mean, he's the Union commander who defeated the Confederacy. You say all the racism. They don't have a clue. They even tore down the statue of Frederick Douglass, who's a civil rights leader. You can tell me he's a racist? See, we just cancel stuff because it's there. We don't even know what it is anymore. And the same way you look at science, we can look at the identical studies in science and come up with very opposite conclusions. We've seen that with everything from masking to climate change to whatever else. You can have this study and come out with two opposite sides on it because this is what I want to believe.
Hang in there, folks. We'll be right back on At the Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green.
At the Core podcasts are available at afr.net. Now, back to At the Core on American Family Radio.
We're back here on At the Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution coach, and we are diving into biblical citizenship in modern America. This is week 3 of biblical citizenship in modern America, talking about truth and courage and just really laying out, I mean, how do we actually do this well? What are the steps that we take to save the country, to restore liberty in this country? And to do that, of course, we have to understand the times. We have to know how this thing works. So let's jump back in. We were listening to David Barton in week 3 of biblical citizenship in modern America.
The same thing with economics. There's 3 primary economic systems in the world, and what happens today in America is we think that any economic system is going to work. Well, we have been the most prosperous nation in the world over the last several decades. Apparently, it's time for a change because right now we know that 75% of college students want to change to socialism, 69% of millennials want to change to socialism, and 41% of all Americans want to change to socialism. Now, the problem with that is in the 5,800 years of recorded history, in the history of the world with thousands of nations, you cannot find a single nation that went from free market to socialism that preserved liberty and maintained prosperity. It's never happened in the history of the world. That's all right, we'll get it right. No, we won't. It's going to be the same outcome every time. It's never worked right, and yet we have this thing of we need a massive change. See, we don't even have a perspective for what's right and wrong and what works and what doesn't. Same with ethics. So all these areas we can point to, we see a lot of shifting change there. There's really no absolute truth in any of them anymore. And that's why truth and fact is now given way to personal opinion. Now, from a biblical perspective, the Bible has a lot to say about truth. And I want to take you specifically to a passage that's in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 1 through 12. And in the first 10 or so verses, first 9 or 10 verses, it's a discussion about the man of lawlessness versus the man of truth. And this conflict is going on between lawlessness and truth. And then after it goes for a while, we get to verse 10, and we find a progression that happens because truth has been presented for several verses, and the other side said, no, I don't believe that's truth, and they rejected truth. And so it's interesting to see what happens in verse 10. It says, they did not receive the love of the truth. So what happens, if you get to the point where I don't care if that's truth or not, I disagree with it. If you get to the point where you do not love the truth, you love your opinion or you love something else more than you love truth, notice this next step that happens. It says, for this reason, God will send them strong delusion. If you get to the point where you no longer love truth, then delusion comes. Notice the next step. It says that they should believe the lie. A delusion comes, believe the lie. And then verse 12 says that all might be damned who believe not the truth. Now, damned is the King James word for condemned or judged. So notice the sequence that happens here. If you don't love or if you reject the truth, what happens is a delusion enters. You will believe the lie. You will then act on the lie, and there will be high costs and consequences. Doesn't matter how nice a person you are, how sincere you are. This is just a sequence that's going to happen. Let me take you into science for a bit. I was in science all the way through high school and college. That was my gig. Went to college on a science scholarship. Taught science when I got out. Was school principal, science teacher, basketball coach. In science, we have what are called laws of science. Now, there's not many laws in science, but a law of science, such as the law of gravity, Newton's laws of gravity, it's called a law because it's never in the history history of the world been violated, not even once. If a law of science is violated even once, it's no longer a law. It can be in theory, an axiom, or a principle, but a law is something that has never in the history of the world been violated, not even once. If it ever is, it's no longer a law of science. So a law of science is it's not an opinion, it is a law. It just doesn't really matter what you think about it. It is a law because it is always universally true at all times, all demographics, all situations. It will always be true. Having said that, I must say that our technology that we have today is so far ahead of where we've been in previous generations. One of our friends is Charlie Duke. Charlie Duke went to the moon on Apollo 16. He was one of the 12 guys that walked on the surface of the moon. He was the youngest moonwalker, and was talking to Charlie about what's happening with space stuff today, the Space Force, etc. And it is amazing what we've done. He just pulled out his phone and said, "See that phone right there?" He says, "This little smart device that every one of us have, sometimes have more than one." He says there is more technology in this smart device than we had in several rooms of computers at NASA when we went to the moon. What we have right there is more than we had to send guys to the moon and bring them back. So our technology has certainly changed, and we've advanced in ways that we heard, for example, we heard presidents say, well, it's time to put a woman on the moon. It's time to put an American on Mars. You start thinking about all the things we're doing in space and the Space Force. And again, talking to Charlie Duke, he was explaining to me what we can do in space and what's out there in Space Force. And it's just unbelievable stuff. It is science fiction kind of stuff that's coming real. So as I look at Newton's laws of gravity, I'm not sure that they have the same impact they did in previous generations because our technology is so much better. Matter of fact, I reject the law of gravity. I don't think that it holds any kind of impact on us anymore because we can get past it with technology. Now, here's the deal. Here's what happens. If I say there's no law of gravity, the next logical step is I'll say, well, the law of gravity doesn't affect me because there is no law of gravity. And if I say the law of gravity doesn't affect me, then I'll say I can do what I want. And quite frankly, I've always wanted to be able to jump off a building and soar. I've wanted to do that since I saw Superman as a kid. So I'm going to jump off a building and I am going to soar all the way until I splat on the sidewalk at the bottom. See, as a result of believing that, I'll act on it, and as a result, I will die. And it really doesn't matter how sincere I am in my beliefs. It doesn't matter that I have a good heart. It doesn't matter. The sequence is there. If I reject the truth, then a delusion will enter. If I believe the lie, I'll act on the lie. It will be a high cost and consequence. So there are universal truths. There are moral truths that are out there. I may disagree with them, may not like them, but you have to find truth and love truth more than you love anything else, more than you love your own political opinion, more than you love your opinion of science. You have to find what truth is and go in that direction. And again, it does not matter how sincere you are, and it doesn't matter how much your personal truth is there. Objective truth will win every time. Now, what it may do is destroy the culture in the meantime. If you get away from objective truth and start believing in personal truth, you may lose the culture. You may lose everything the nation's been. You have to have a stable foundation. You can't change foundations on whim and will. So what happens is, no matter the size of the lie that you believe, it will always cause some degree of harm, even if it's a little white lie. Yeah, a little white lie will grow into bigger stuff and bigger stuff. So you always have to have an absolute love for the truth. That's something we have to really learn to identify as citizens. We'll talk about later about how you find the truth, because that's a difficult thing now. But when you look at truth for Christians, there are sources of truth that we know about. When we talk about truth, we have passages in the Bible, like John 17:17, where the Bible says, Jesus talking, it says, sanctify them by the truth. Thy word is truth. So Jesus says God's word is true. One of the things we talked about in previous sessions is how the Bible does apply to everything. Some of the greatest philosophers in American history used the Bible for economic basis. The Pilgrims used it to create the free market system, 1627. The Pilgrims used it to be able to have equality. While Jamestown brought slavery in 1619, as Tim talked about last week, the Plymouth model is exactly the opposite. They said all men are created equal. That's lines we hear from the Declaration because of what we see in Acts 17:26 and what the Bible says in Revelation 7:9 about equality of mankind. So many ideas came out of the Bible, including forms of government. In the Bible, you'll see 7 different forms of government illustrated. But some forms of government are shown to be much superior than others. And our founding fathers chose what they believed to be the best form, which is a constitutional republic. They pointed to Exodus 18:21 as the reason for choosing that form. You'll also find it in Deuteronomy 1:15 and 16, Deuteronomy 16:18. So the Bible applies to all aspects of life. So truth, we believe, comes out of the Bible for everything we need, not just theological truth, all sorts of truth, science, everything else. In the same way, we're told in John 14:6, Jesus says, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. Nobody comes to the Father but by me. And by the way, this is a claim of exclusivity. Jesus is saying nobody gets to heaven except by me. And so Christians will say, well, I don't believe that. I believe anything you believe will get you to heaven, which is what 80% of Christians, they're contradicting the truth. And Jesus is the truth personified. So if you're interested in truth, all right, you go to God's Word, you go to the person of Jesus Christ. This is where you find truth. And as you find truth there for Christians, this is the difficulty we have today. As you look at the Bible today, only 9% of Christians read the Bible on a daily basis. So with only 9% of Christians reading the Bible on a daily basis, most have no idea what objective truth is. They don't know, for example, what the Bible says about issues like immigration. They have no clue the fact that in the Bible there were 3 different types of immigrant levels, what we call the native-born citizen, what was the naturalized citizen, and what was a green card. The kind of policy we have today came from the Bible a long time ago. There's so much in the Bible that deals with criminal justice, even what we do with the due process rights and Bill of Rights, the 4th through the 8th Amendment, even the U.S. Code annotated Federal Practice and Procedure points back to verses in the Bible is why we have due process rights. But see, we don't know the Bible today, so we don't even know how practical it is in every area of life. So not knowing the Bible, it's not surprising that only 6% of Americans have a biblical worldview. That is, even with 65% of Americans professing Christianity, only 1 out of 16 Americans actually sees things from the same perspective God sees when He gives it to us in His Word. So we're not even thinking like the way He wants us to think because we're not in His Word. So having said that, His Word is a good place for truth, and this is where, when you have His Word, it trumps my opinions. It's like the laws of science. When I was in science, it doesn't matter what my opinion is about gravity. It's a law. It's going to be there. And I can say all day long, I want to fly from a building, but I will hit the ground every time I jump off unless I have some kind of technology to get me temporarily past that. It doesn't change the law of science, though. So the supremacy of personal opinion has to go away. So this is why what I want to hit tonight is we have to develop a love for the truth. We have to be able to conform and change our own thinking, our own action, our own behavior, even our own political affiliation if we need to conform to what truth is. It doesn't matter what any party says, and right now we know that there's 17 different types of political parties in America. Doesn't matter what they say, what is truth? Align yourself with truth wherever that may be. Now, having said that, finding the truth is the biggest problem we have today. Because if I tell you need to believe the truth, the question should be, well, how do I know it's true? Good question. How do you know it's true? I can look it up on the web, and instantly I can come to 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 memes that will say whatever my viewpoint is. Does that mean it's truth because I can find it out there on the web? No, not at all. Not by a long shot. As a matter of fact, as we have seen big tech start to deplatform more than 70,000 individuals and groups off the platform because of what they believe. As we see that going on, there's also a definite bias that goes in even your searches. So if you're looking for truth, for example, in writing a book, we do a lot of writing, and I was recently working on a guy named John Clem, and John Clem, or John Clum, right, actually. John Clum was an Indian agent back at the time of Geronimo. He's the only guy ever to capture Geronimo, and he was a strong Christian guy. He was actually chosen by the government to go in and handle the reservation because, unlike the other Indian agents, he wasn't going to be bribed or bought off. He was going to do the right thing. He had integrity. This is a great story. So I went on, I had Bing up as a search service. I looked for John Clum Christian. Couldn't get a single hit. I thought, that's interesting. So I just went over to DuckDuckGo and tried it on DuckDuckGo, and all sorts of articles popped up about John Clum the Christian. Interesting. I'll look for that topic on Bing, and it's cut out. Same way, I was writing about Hollywood and how different Hollywood used to be. As a matter of fact, there's about 24 guys who won the Academy Award back in the golden age of Hollywood that were veterans. We loved America. We promoted America. So many faith movies back in those days. We believed, as George Washington said, that religion and morality were the foundation of patriotism. That's what he said in his farewell address. So Hollywood used to promote that. And one of the guys who helped do that was a guy named Cecil B. DeMille. Cecil B. DeMille directed 81 movies. He was nominated for 3 Academy Awards. The Greatest Show on Earth and the 10 Commandments and all these great movies he did. And he's a strong Christian guy. As a matter of fact, after he did the movie 10 Commandments, Yul Brynner, who was one of the stars in that movie, Charlton Heston, another star, the 3 of them went around the United States erecting 10 Commandments monuments all over the United States. Some accounts say they erected more than 4,000 10 Commandments monuments in parks everywhere. When the case went to the Supreme Court a few years ago about whether Texas could have a 10 Commandments out on its courtyard there in the Capitol area, it was 10 Commandments that was part of what had been erected back there when the Hollywood guys were actually erecting 10 Commandments. That's what led to the Supreme Court case. So I know that Cecil B. DeMille, very strong faith guy. So on Bing, I look up Cecil B. DeMille, Christian. Nothing comes up. I go to DuckDuckGo, Cecil B. DeMille, Christian, listing all over the place. So you actually now have to find out, how do you find truth? How do you go to a source of truth? Because you can't just trust the first thing that pops up anymore, because algorithms are changed in such a way. This is where you have to go back to original document. If it was a trial, what you do is you throw out all hearsay evidence, and you have to have primary first source evidence from an eyewitness. We don't allow somebody who heard second or third hand or whatever. You got to go to somebody who is an expert on that, who actually saw it happen and was there. And that's why with what we have at Wildmon, there's a collection you saw last week. We've got more than 100,000 items that predate 1812. So if you want to know what the Founding Fathers thought about judicial activism or what they thought about immigration or anything else, let's just go get the original documents and read it in their own handwriting. That's one way you find truth. So what happens is, to find the truth today is now becoming hard work, because you're going to hear all sorts of things, and then you're going to hear even conservative media pick it up and say it. And just because 3 or 4 conservative channels say it doesn't mean it's more any right than 3 or 4 progressive channels say it. You have to be able to say, what is the truth? And I find I tend to be a conservative. That's not what I call myself. That's what everybody else calls me. I just hold beliefs that I think are consistent with the Constitution and the Bible, which that would put me in the conservative camp today. I would point out that actually being called a conservative, progressive, anything else, while it's helpful for identification, it really means nothing. I've got a friend who serves in Parliament in Australia who believes exactly what I believe, which over in Australia, that means you're a member of the Liberal Party. The Liberal Party is the party that believes in biblical morality and biblical principles. So the names we stick on labels really doesn't matter as much as what the beliefs are. So even as a conservative, I find that there are so many of my conservative news outlets, I go, no, that's actually not true. Actually, here's what the Founding Fathers said about the issue of filibusters in the Senate. And while you may be conservative and you may be chewing up Schumer in the Senate for trying to break the filibuster rule, here's actually what the Founding Fathers said about that. That's not, to me, a conservative liberal issue. That's a truth issue that goes back to what the actual debates were when it actually happened. So that's part of what we have to do, is we have to put hard work in. You see, in America, we've had good intentions for so long that we've really been coasting on these good intentions. We know that our teacher's not lying to us. We know the media is not really lying to us. Well, not anymore. We can't make those assumptions in any area anymore. See, as good-hearted people, we want to assume the best of other people. And in doing that, we often buy a lot of garbage. It's really not true, because we're assuming that I've got a good car. I wouldn't deliberately lie to somebody. They wouldn't do it to me. Yeah, they would.
Last break of the day, folks. Stay with me. We'll be right back on At the Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green.
At the Core podcasts are available at afr.net. Now, back to At the Core on American Family Radio.
Welcome back at the Core with Walker Wildmon and Rick Green. I'm Rick Green, America's Constitution coach, and we are in the middle of Biblical Citizenship in Modern America, Week 3. Understanding the times, just like the men of Issachar, understanding the times and knowing what to do. Let's jump right back in with David Barton.
And so what has to happen now is you can't coast with good intentions anymore. You have to say, wait a minute, time out. I need to find out if that's true. I love the passage in Acts 17:21, or 17:11, Acts 17:11, where Paul, on his second missionary journey, as he's going from place to place. Remember, Paul is the most credentialed apostle in Christianity. He's the guy with all the PhDs after his name. He was raised at the foot of Gamaliel, who was a great thinker, great legal scholar, great biblical scholar. Paul had all the credentials. He was a Pharisee of the Pharisees. Everything was there. And when he was talking about the Bereans on his second missionary journey, he said, I love these guys. He said, they don't believe anything I tell them until after they go check the scriptures to see if I was telling them the truth. And Paul said that those in Berea were more noble than those even in Thessalonica. And we have the books in the Bible, the 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, and those in Thessalonica. Paul said, these guys in Berea are more noble than even the guys in Thessalonica because they won't believe anything I tell them until they go check the scriptures for themselves to see if it's true. See, that's the attitude you get. What I'm telling you tonight, you need to go check and see if this is true. You need to find out if I'm telling you. You can't just assume that people are telling you the truth. That's what we've coasted on for a long time, and look where we are now as a result. We don't even recognize evil intent when it comes anymore. So what has to happen is we have to find the truth. So you have to love the truth, you have to find the truth, and the third thing we have to do is we have to defend the truth. Defending the truth takes a lot of courage. This is a different time in our history, unlike any other time. Recent polling tells us that 77% of traditional value Americans now self-censor because of the current hostility that's out there. We've seen 70,000 people in groups be deplatformed. I'm going to have to tone it down a little bit, otherwise I won't have any friends left to talk to. I've got 200 reach that I can get here, and so I got to tone it down so I can keep my 200. And so what happens is we're backing away from the message. We're backing away from confronting what the truth is, and we're going more into what they want us to say so that we can keep a position of not losing all of our voice. That's not the right thing to do. You can't be backed up and you can't be intimidated. And now that's what we find is Americans are self-censoring because of the climate. If I say this, I'm going to get attacked on Facebook. If I say this, they're going to launch on me. Whatever it is, you can't self-censor anymore. It's interesting that in the Bible, and the Bible tells us so much, and not even just about the practical things like economics, the other things we talked about, government, law, but it tells us even about spiritual things like heaven and hell. And according to the Bible, heaven and hell, they are very real places. We know about heaven. We know about Jesus and how we get to heaven. But hell, we don't always spend a lot of time on hell. We know that it exists, and yet the Bible tells us that is a very real place. It's just as real as what we believe heaven to be. As a matter of fact, if you look in the book of Revelation, chapter 21, verse 8, in the book of Revelation, it talks about the lake that burns with fire and sulfur, which is a second death. That's hell. That's describing hell. In that verse, who is it that goes to hell? According to that verse, you read the first part of the verse, it says, well, the faithless, the detestable, the murderers, the sexually immoral, the sorcerers, the idolaters, and all liars. That's some bad folks. A murderer and liars and perjurers, and those are folks that go to hell. You may notice that there's a blank at the top there. You see that blank at the top? What is it that starts the list of who gets sent to hell? The first thing on the list is cowards and fearful. All the other people go there for what they do. They killed someone. They are liars. They're perjurers. These folks go there for what they didn't do. They didn't have any backbone. They wouldn't stand up. They were cowards. They were fearful. It's interesting to me that God puts that at the top of the list of stuff he doesn't like. And this is what will get you sent to hell. Wow. We need to develop a backbone. Imagine if the founding fathers had the same attitude that so many conservatives today have. We'd still be part of the British, we'd still be British colonies. And I'm not saying that we need to go out and have confrontation and we need to have violent stuff and have a revolution. By the way, we don't even understand that. Those guys worked 11 years to not get into a conflict. After the British started coming after them 11 years later, they're still trying peaceful reconciliation. Matter of fact, 6 years after the British started firing bullets at them, they were still trying to reconcile. They weren't looking to split, but once they got pushed so far, that's the only thing they could do and stand with integrity. And so you have to have some point at which you say, you know what, I'm not crossing this line with social media. I'm not crossing this line with the school district. They're not going to talk me into whatever it is. You have to take a position, and you can't be fearful and you can't be a coward. So that's what the Bible tells us, and that's why courage is the third thing that I'll point out. So in talking about truth, just to hit this again real quickly, you have to love truth. above your own opinion. You have to be willing to change. That's some of the hardest decisions to make, is that I have to give up something I've believed for much of my life because I now find I'm wrong. You have to be willing to love the truth, but then you now have to be able to find the truth. And we've never been at a point in America where this is the situation we have now. There's so many lies out there that are presented as truth that how do we know what's true and what's not? This is where it's going to take a lot of hard work to find the truth. We've got to put more effort into being a citizen than we've ever had to do in our entire life, more effort into being a Christian than we have our entire life. And then once we do that, we have to defend the truth. And defending the truth takes a lot of backbone, a lot of courage, particularly in a nation that's as polarized as we are now. You see, when 3 out of 5 Americans believe there is no absolute truth, for you to defend it means 60% is going to be against you because they think absolute truth is determined by them, not by any objective standard. So just tell you, you're going to be in the minority when you start standing there for truth, even if it's among your own folks. And, I kind of look at what happened with Moses as a great example. I've been involved in politics. I've been involved in church, held a lot of church positions, held a lot of political positions. In both positions, the motto I put up in my office wall is, I don't need enemies, I have friends. And often, it's the friends that attack you worse than your enemies do. I've learned in both politics and church, I really need bulletproof vests. And I always wear them to the back because it's a friendly fire that kills you. You look at Moses. Moses only had to fight the Egyptians one time. He fought his own people for 40 years. And that's the way it is. You start standing for truth, and you're going to have a lot of opposition, even from people that should be on your side. Just because they oppose you doesn't mean they won't change eventually. You just keep standing firm, keep making your articulate arguments, you keep reasoning, keep presenting truth, and you'll find that people eventually shift and come back in the right direction. Because what you're saying the first time, they've never heard before. So they're going to reject it because I've never heard that. Understand? So let me explain it to you a different way. Let me come at it from this direction. See, you just have to be faithful to hang in there and keep saying the truth, keep defending the truth, keep speaking the truth, keep having courage with truth. You'll find that you'll start developing a following. They'll come behind you and say, you're right. I used to believe you were really crazy, but now I find that what you said is true. That's the kind of tenacity we have to have with truth. So I encourage you to love the truth, to spend the effort to find the truth, and then to defend the truth. If you're interested, the book we have, The American Story, it's all about truth of what happened in America. There's a counter-narrative of the 1619 Project, and it's not based on our opinions. There's more than 1,000 footnotes in there that go back to original sources. So you can check it yourself. We encourage you to do that. And then seeing how the Bible relates to every aspect of life is why we did the Founder's Bible. It takes the Bible verse, it shows what goes with immigration or economics or civil justice or education or anything else. Bible is a great book. So I encourage you to get into those books. Study them. If you need resources, it's a great place to go. God bless you guys. Thanks for letting me share with you.
See, truth overcomes error. That's why error hates truth. So you and I can say this room is 17 feet wide. You say it's 16. You say it's 13, and we're all happy until somebody comes and measures it, and that person that measures it says, "Well, it's actually 12." Then immediately all of us know that we were wrong. Therefore, we hate the person that revealed we were wrong. As long as we could philosophize forever, as long as you say it's 13 and I say it's 17, he says 50, we're happy as be. But once you have truth, then it reveals error, and error hates truth. That's number one. Number two, truth overcomes error. So I'm representing a person and is accused of stealing a ATM machine. And the attorney gets up and she says why he wouldn't even think of such doing thing. He loves his mother and he was having dinner with his sister in Portland, Oregon. Here's the receipts from the filling station or from the restaurant where they were, and they go on. And you don't care what she says, because when she's finished, you're going to have a security camera that shows him driving up to the ATM, and you'll see him put a chain around the ATM. You'll see his face as he leans over the camera, and you'll get his fingerprints as he pushes the finger. And the truth will overcome the error such that the only way she can succeed, she has to prevent the presentation of truth. And every time on these talk shows, when you start to make a point, they start talking over you. If you let one little conservative, you can have 57 liberals come speak at a college campus. You let one little conservative come, they all scream and yell and break it. Why? Because truth overcomes error.
It's really
well
put.
in our scriptures, where does truth come from? What's the measuring rod? And so
he was the embodiment of truth.
So our founder, I am the truth. Therefore, you can talk about any religion you want, but not Christ. So I can pray at inaugural in the name of Mother Earth and flowers and eagle feathers and nobody cares. But you pray in the name of Jesus Christ and all hell breaks loose. Why? Because I am the truth. And so we hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created. Now, who's a creator? John 1:1. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word, all things were made by Him, without Him was not anything made that was made. And so therefore, that is our Creator, gave us life, gave us liberty at the same time. So they want to get rid of God, so then they can take innocent life, so then they are in the process of taking our liberty. And one party is dedicated to doing that, to taking God out of the Pledge of Allegiance, to taking God out of all those references, who then supports the taking of innocent life. You cannot be, not only can you not be a candidate for office and support life, I met with a series of Democrat consultants, and these Democrat consultants explained to them that when they go to, if they support a Democrat candidate for office who is pro-life, that they will be blackballed by the National Committee. They'll never be able to do it again. So the Democrat Party is committed to doing away with God, with life, and of course we have this confrontation with our liberty. And the only person that says that the parties are all alike are a person that doesn't know about either one.
Welcome to Constitution Alive, the Citizen's Guide to America's Founding Documents. We are here in one of the most amazing libraries on the planet with one of the foremost experts on the Founding Fathers and our founding documents, David Barton. David, thank you so much for having us here.
Hey, good to be here, Rick. Thanks for having me, bro.
So why do you dive into so much history? Why spend so much time in the past?
You know, the reason we do that is because we have been the most successful nation in the history of the world to this point, and there's a reason for that. And our objective with what we want to do, our objective is really well stated by John Jay. Now, John Jay became the original Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, but at the time they wrote the Constitution, he and James Madison, Alexander Hamilton did the Federalist Papers, and that was to explain to America what the Constitution is all about. So he's really one of the three guys most responsible for the adoption of the Constitution through those Federalist Papers. He had a great statement on why we study this type of stuff, and this is the statement he made. He said, every member of the state ought diligently to read and to study the Constitution of his country and teach the rising generation to be free. Now, it's interesting. He relates being free to knowing the Constitution. You ought to know the Constitution and teach the next generation if you intend to be free. He says, by knowing their rights, they will sooner perceive when they're violated and be the better prepared to defend and assert them. Now, that's really the objective of what we're doing in all these next lessons that come along. And there's 6 verbs that he has in there that will be really the guideline for what every citizen needs to shoot for. So the 6 verbs.
So this will really drive everything we do for the rest of this course then. This is our outline.
That's the outline. He says, first, you want to read the Constitution of your country. You want to read and study it. And it's one thing to read it, it's another thing to study it. Yeah. So read is like a quick perusal, but study is get to know it. And then he says, and then you want to be able to teach it. You want to be able to take the next generation and say, hey guys, here's what you need to know. Here's the document you need to know. Here's the principles. This is what will keep you free. And this is the formula that's produced American success. Then he says, when you do that, then you'll know your rights, and when you know your rights, you'll perceive when they're being violated, and then you'll be prepared to defend and to assert them. And there's a big difference between defend and assert. Defend is on defense. I'll defend my rights. Assert them is I'm going on offense to make sure I defend your rights.
Which we need to do more of.
And that's what we need.
If that's what's going to keep us free, this part is where we're really losing out, teaching the rising generation to be free. If we don't have a good education system, if we're not teaching what's in this room, we're losing the formula.
Well, you hit the education system, let's just be real blunt. We spend up to $120,000 over the educational course of a kid to go to school for 12 years. We're not getting our money's worth.
Yeah, that's in some of our less expensive districts.
Well, that's right. That's the average nationally. Yeah. So it's going to be up or down in some. Washington, D.C. is way more than that.
Yeah.
So it depends on the district you're in. But what we know is that every state constitution says that the purpose of public education is to prepare active and informed citizens.
So we started those education systems to do exactly what John Jay is saying here. Yeah.
But what we know right now is if you look at recent elections, those who have gone through our public education system, you're looking right now at 70% that do not know the Constitution is the supreme law of the land.
Wow.
So
we're definitely failing on teaching the rising generation.
You're looking at 65% that cannot even tell you what the role of the judiciary is. That's one of the three branches. As a matter of fact, speaking of one of the three branches, 62% of those who have gone through public education cannot even name the three branches of government.
More than half. And
More
they
than
can't
half.
So you definitely don't know what those branches are supposed to do if you don't even know what they are. Yeah.
48% of elected officials cannot name the three branches of government.
That's half of our actual public servants in office.
If you don't know three branches, you don't know checks and balances, you don't know functions, you don't know what the Constitution, and that's why you read and study the Constitution, you teach it the rising generation.
Well, maybe they devalue what is in here because they...
All right, got to cut myself off there mid-sentence because we are out of time for today. We're going to pick this up where we're leaving it off in our next episode that I'll be with you, which will be Tuesday. So Walker will be with you tomorrow and Monday. I'll be back with you on Tuesday, and we'll pick up where we left off with biblical citizenship and modern